Hello, and welcome to the exciting return of our Lions Lecture Series. This event is a joint venture between the graduate school and first year TRAC, and one that we hope brings you all some entertainment over the next hour as our distinguished individuals take the stage to share their interests and passions and projects with you all. Tonight we have Dr. Matt Wood and Dr. Sharonda Pruitt presenting and joining us. Each of our presenters will speak for 20 minutes, and after each presenter, we will open the floor for a few minutes for any follow-up questions or comments for our presentation. Please feel free to enjoy our bar in the back. Sodexo is supplying a wonderful bartender, and they are accepting card only tonight, but it looks like some of you have happily found that out. I would like to invite Dr. VR to the stage as well to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Sierra. I'm actually supposed to be Dr. Jennifer Schrader. She sends her regards. She cannot be here. She's the Dean of the Graduate School and a very proud co-sponsor of this event. First of all, I just want to say how great it is to be back on campus. Some wearing masks, some not wearing masks, but us slowly getting over our fear of being in a room with more than 2 people and not zooming into a meeting. So we thought this summer, what can we do to re-engage, to recommit, to reignite the campus? It's been a long time since we've been together. And generally, we have a book in common and we have a Lions, why am I feedback? But generally, we have an author address and the Lion Lecture, which is one big, great affair. And we decided this year that we would bring back a different version of the Lion Lecture, which interestingly enough, Dr. Matt Wood had created 5 years ago when he was the Dean of the Graduate School. And so it is only fitting that he will serve as our inaugural speaker for the Lion Lecture Series, which we will carry out all year now. So it is my honor to provide a very brief bio of Dr. Matt Wood, just to give you a little bit of background about his expertise. So he has a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. He's held an NSF NATO postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Montreal. He spent 20 years at the Florida Institute of Technology before coming to A&M Commerce. And since being at A&M Commerce, he has served in a variety of administrative roles. He was recently named Regents Professor, and recently also returned to being a faculty member just before COVID, which was good timing on his part. In his private life, he has a private pilot license that he earned in 2019. He flies often with his partner, Dr. Aslange. They enjoy barbecue and vacations via air travel. Dr. Wood's topic tonight is not a chair falling over. It is NASA's James Webb Space Telescope early results, infant galaxies, and alien atmospheres. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Matt Wood to the stage.
Good evening. I'm only keeping back. Rob's for coming. Welcome. Thank you all for coming out. I'll turn this down a little bit. I'm actually a bit loud. So I want to thank you all for... Okay, it's going to be a sing-along. That was good. I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank Dr. VR, Dr. Schrader, Sierra, everybody, Russ, etc., Rob, for organizing and all of this. And so the idea of this is, think about 30,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. Homo sapiens gathered around a campfire, and a member of the tribe stood and told a story. And that story put pictures into people's minds. And that's what we're trying to do with the Lion Lecture Series, right? To kind of ignite some ideas in your minds. So tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the James Webb Space Telescope, some of the early results. And so first I want to talk about the technology just a little bit because it is incredible. This is a $10 billion mission. Now I do want to say a lot of that money was salaries of graduate students and postdocs and research scientists over the years, engineers. So it was launched on December 25th, a nice little Christmas present to all of us. And so I made a highlights of the highlights reel. And so here is the launch. It launched from French Guiana.
And we have easy to start.
So the whole telescope. packed into that little telescope there.
Decollage liftoff from a tropical rainforest to the edge of time itself. James Webb begins a voyage back to the birth of the universe. Punching a hole through the clouds, 20 seconds into the flight, good pitch program reported.
Pardon my cut edits. So this was the whole telescope as it launched. So it was a bit like an origami. So it's 6.5 meters across. That's 21 feet across, right? That's here to that wall. And they packed it in this material. So this is when they released it from the rocket.
We marvel on this view from the upper stage camera. This will be humanity's last view of the James Webb Space Telescope as it moves to its workplace about 1 million miles away from Earth.
And so that was the solar panel coming up. That provides the power. Oh, if they were bored, they could watch The Simpsons. Okay. So it keeps station around this point that's called the Lagrange point 2. It's about 1 million miles away from Earth, 4 times the distance from the Earth to the Sun. And it's on the far side of the Earth from the Sun. I'll show you that orbit in just a second. And the launch was so precise. And you're basically coasting uphill to this parking spot. And we're going to orbit around that parking spot. It was so precise that we're going to have fuel for about 10 years of operations. And that's great, because we definitely can't go service it like we could with Hubble. All right, so it allows continuous sunshine for the solar panels, and it has these sunscreens that are the size of tennis courts, and that allows it to be very, very cool down at 40 kelvins, minus 390 degrees Fahrenheit. Along the way, there were 50 major deployments, there were 178 release mechanisms. Everything had to work perfectly or the missions would fail. $10 billion. And it worked. So this is showing the orbit that it has. So there's the Earth, there's the Moon, and this is that L2 point, and then we're kind of going into the reference frame of the satellite. And you can see that its solar panel is always in sunlight. It doesn't pass through the shadow of the Earth. And here, this is how it unfolds. So there's the solar panel. That's the thing you saw come out. There's the antenna. These are the sun shields, about the size of a tennis court. That's a little thing to just sort of balance out the solar wind. These things get pulled out. It's 5 layers of mylar. It has to come out. It has to be tensioned. They're all separated from each other. That's the secondary mirror, so the light bounces off the primary mirror, secondary mirror, and down into the instruments. 18 segments, 6.5 meters across. So it is an infrared telescope. The shortest wavelength is about 600 nanometers, and that's sort of red light, and then it goes into the heat region, deep into the heat region. And so it needs to be very cold. So they have this sun shield. So it's about 185 degrees Fahrenheit on that side and minus 388 Fahrenheit on that side. So we got 5 layers, the sun comes in, and by the time we're over here, nice and cold. This side will never see the sun again, and there's no camera on board that. Then you got 18 different mirrors, and you had a rocket launch. High G's, a lot of shaking going on. So the first thing they had to do was to identify which, right, they pointed a bright star and then say, okay, so which of these belongs to which mirror? And then we need to arrange them all, and then we need to focus each one, and then we need to bring them all together so that it operates as a single mirror and not 18 individual mirrors. So very precise positioning of all of those 18 mirrors. That all worked. And this was the first view. Can we get the lights down up here? These pictures will work much, much better if it's dark up here. I know you can't see me, but I'm not that pretty. So this is just the first image that they released. It's called an engineering image, kind of first light image. And you can see these little things here. Those are galaxies. Yeah, as much light as you can turn off, the better. Don't really need to see me. Can you go darker? Can you go all the way off? Is that how you can do? Okay. All right. So this was the image that was released in a White House event. And so this was kind of the first release. So this is a cluster of galaxies. And it's about 4 billion light years away. So 4 billion years ago here on Earth, we had just finished a major bombardment of asteroids. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And so we were maybe just starting to get cool enough for life to start evolving in the oceans. And that's these foreground things. But then you also see a lot of these background things, and they're kind of warped and curvy and stuff like that. Those are background galaxies. Gravity can act like a lens, and it's a bit of a bumpy lens. So these two things are actually two images of the same galaxy. So imagine kind of a distorted lens, right, kind of rippling glass. Two images of the very same galaxy. I think these two might also be the same galaxy, different. This little tiny thing right here is one of the very furthest things we've seen in the universe. So that's it, kind of right there. So it formed about 300 million years after the Big Bang. And it took about 150 million years for stars to be formed. These things have to cool down. So just, incredibly distant things, and it's been finding a lot of things that are further away than anything we had seen before, even with Hubble. This is a picture of the Tarantula Nebula. Again, if you can make it darker, that'd be better. So this is the Tarantula Nebula. This is a star-forming region. It is in the Large Magellanic Cloud. It's about 160,000 light years away. So it's taken light 160,000 years to get there from, perfect, to get here from there. And so, big cluster of stars, and then there's a lot of radiation and winds that push out from this, and it pushes into this cloud, and it triggers more star formation. And because Webb Space Telescope is looking at the infrared, it can see deeper into these clouds. So we're going to learn a lot about how stars form and how they evolve. This is a Hubble Space Telescope image of the same region. And notice, right, the spots are a little bit bigger, a little fuzzier compared to what we have down there. And go back to the Webb image. So the resolution is much better than Hubble, and Hubble has amazing resolution, right? So all those great Hubble pictures that you grew up with, we're going to have some even better pictures coming up. This is a picture of the Carina Nebula. So there's a whole bunch of really bright hot stars up there, and they are blasting the surface of this. These things that look kind of like dust rising up or haze, that's actually ionized material that's rising up from that surface. And again, all kinds of star formation going along there. And just to give you some scale, sort of from here to here is 7 light years. So it takes 7 years for light to travel from there to there. It takes 8.5 minutes for light to travel from the sun to Earth's. So, it's big. To show you a little bit about Hubble versus James Webb Space Telescope, this is a Hubble Space Telescope image of galaxy IC 5332. It's a little bit smaller than our galaxy, but our galaxy would look approximately like this. So Hubble is a visible and ultraviolet telescope. Webb is a visible infrared telescope. So notice there's some dark patches there. If you go out on a dark night and look and find the Milky Way galaxy, you can see some dark bands, and that's dust. Right, so that's interstellar dust, and it's almost like cigarette smoke. It's tiny, tiny little dust particles. This is the same galaxy in infrared. NASA tweets out, space, but make it goth. So because it's in infrared, it's sort of revealing the bones of the galaxy, right? We really are seeing the universe in a whole new light with this. This is a group of galaxies. It's called Stephan's Quintet. They're interacting. This one is actually a foreground galaxy. It's only 40 million light years away. The rest of these are about 160 million light years away. And this one is just being shredded, right? So these are actually running into each other. Our galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy will run into each other in about 4.5 billion universe. So, make your plans. But it's not just pretty pictures. We actually learn a huge amount about the universe through a process called spectroscopy. So you imagine that Pink Floyd album cover where we run like through a prism and it breaks it up into wavelengths. Well, those wavelengths, when we pass that through material, we can see what the material is made of. So that's spectroscopy. And so there are planets where their orbit cuts in front of their star. And so this is just showing the brightness as a function of time for this particular star, WASP 96b. And this is to scale, and it's showing a sort of Jupiter-like planet very close to its star. And as it passes in front, it cuts out some of the light of the star. But some of that light goes through the atmosphere of that planet. And so on this particular planet, they have detected water vapor. So they take a spectrum of just the star, and then they take a spectrum when the planet's in front of the star, they subtract those two. And so we're able to see there's water vapor in the atmosphere of that planet. So that's kind of cool. We're now able to measure atmosphere compositions of other planets. This is a different object. This is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, so Venus's atmosphere, a whole bunch of carbon dioxide in it. Again, this is very, very close to the star, not habitable at all. But one of the missions of NASA is to look for planets outside the solar system, we call those exoplanets, that are the right distance from their parent star such that it could have liquid water on the surface and hence maybe could have life. And I think it's very possible that in the next 10 to 40 years, maybe with Webb, maybe with some other telescope, we'll be able to use this technique to find a planet that has oxygen and nitrogen in the atmosphere. And if it has oxygen and nitrogen, there's at least plant life. And that will be a milestone for humanity, right? Because we will at least know that there is, we will have data that there's life on other planets. I don't believe there is, but we will have data. So, again, we detect it, we will have direct evidence for at least plant life. Now, tell us about it. All right, so coming back a little closer to home, this is Neptune. So not an exoplanet. So that's Neptune. This is Triton. So moon of Neptune is very icy, so it's very reflective. Neptune's actually pretty dark because it's got mostly methane in the atmosphere. But again, I want you to notice here, right? Pretty much everything else in this image is a galaxy. Those other images that I showed you, right, so the things that have the 6-point spiky things, those were stars, but almost everything in those images were galaxies, background galaxies. So the universe is just filled with galaxies. So here's a little close-up. And so we see the rings of Neptune. We haven't had an image that showed the rings of Neptune for 30 years now. So Neptune has very faint rings, right? You think rings, you think Saturn, and they're beautiful. You can see them through a small telescope or even decent binoculars. But here, rings of Neptune. We've got some of the moons of Neptune. So in the next 10 years, what can we expect from James Webb Space Telescope? Well, I like this quote from Max Planck. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Learn new stuff. A mentor of mine said, anytime you increase the capability of your measurements by a factor of 10, you will discover things that differ by kind, not just by degree. So you're not just, doing the same thing a little bit better, but you actually discover brand new things. So it provides a new window into the universe. Its infrared sensitivity will reveal the very first galaxies that are formed. So that's the infant galaxies. 21-foot aperture has just incredible resolution. We're going to learn about how stars and galaxies form and evolve. We're going to be able to probe the atmospheres of alien worlds. That's just incredible. we're going to be able to maybe figure out, why do all galaxies seem to have massive black holes at the centers of them? That's something we still don't really understand. And then what is the true rate of expansion for the universe? And like they used to say when I watched Batman as a kid, stay tuned for lots more exciting developments. Thank you very much.
Hopefully I can avoid feedback. Any questions?
She says what?
Can they tell how old the galaxies are? Do we know how old our galaxy is?
Galaxies formed about 150 million years after the Big Bang. And they build up. So they start with tiny little galaxy fragments, and then those merge and make bigger and bigger and bigger galaxies. We have a reasonably good idea of how that
That they've all
works.
been there since the Big Bang. That they're just
The hydrogen and helium has, and then they keep merging. So we make tiny galaxies first, and then we make more and more. So if we look at these really deep images, we see a whole lot of little galaxies. And then as we look closer and closer, we see fewer big galaxies. And telescopes are time machines. The further out we look, the further back in time we look.
Next question?
So I'm a neuroscientist and I'm looking into microgalaxies in the cells, in those amazing cells. But even like imaging and taking an image, maybe just 10 nanometers might take, depending on the detail you want, maybe even 30 minutes with confocal microscopy. So I was very wondering when you showed that image, these points are 7 million or billion years away. How long does that image take to be processed?
I think several hours is typical for those images that I've shown. I think that first image was at least 10 hours of integration. And they take a whole bunch and they stack them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Show me your hand, I can bring it up.
Barbara has a question.
If you say the universe is expanding, why are those Stevens things bumping into one another?
That's a great question. So the universe is expanding in general. But if things are close, gravity will attract them together. So the universe is expanding and the galaxies are just sort of sliding along. Right, so imagine an expanding sheet, but it's an icy sheet and you've got some bees, and if they get close enough, then they're going to attract each other. But at large distances, they don't.
Other questions?
Same.
How do you foresee our spectroscopy techniques changing as we learn to control for gravitational lensing we haven't seen before?
I don't really know. I'm not an expert in that field. So I just don't know the answer. All right, well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. And I just came for some education and entertainment, and I'm wowed by the audience and the quality of questions that you asked. So I feel like I need to go back to school again to get up to speed on the questions that were asked, and then to understand all of those images. So thanks, Dr. Wood, for kicking us off. Up next, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Sharonda Pruitt. As a native of Dallas, Texas, she is a lifelong educator with over 25 years in public schooling and degrees from Southern Methodist University and Texas A&M University Commerce. An accomplished urban school reform practitioner, she has expertise in instituting magnet programs, career-themed academies, and transforming middle and comprehensive high schools. She has served in a range of positions within public education, as well as serving as legislative compliance coordinator, sounds very official, where she assisted in facilitating newly passed legislation, implementing that into district policy and procedures. Currently, she serves as the director of Pride Prep and the Attaining College Entry and Success Project, a program funded by a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. In her spare time, she also serves as assistant professor in educational leadership at Texas A&M University of Commerce, where she works to train the next group of aspiring school leaders. Please welcome Dr. Pruitt and her presentation, A Funny Thing Happened at School, Stories from a Superhero Educator.
All right, so as a former principal, I'm a little bit more informal. So you're not going to have a formal presentation, but you're going to have a lot of laughter. These stories are a collection of 26 years working in public education. So one of the things is that I started in public education as a student at SMU, of course, and what I realized is that I wanted to be pre-law. After a time, I realized that me and the pre-law students were like oil and vinegar. I was like, I need to get away from these people. And so, as they like to say, the rest is history. So tonight I'm going to share a collection of the stories related to being a superhero educator. And so there are about 6 or 7 stories I'm going to share, along with 6 or 7 lessons learned. So the first lesson learned, after 26 years of being an educator, is that, guess what? Super educators have what we call it. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of family background. My mother is from Canton, Texas, and those of you that are familiar with Canton realize that there is a world-famous Canton flea market known as First Monday. While she was there, she went to school in a one-room schoolhouse. It was, of course, segregated. And my grandmother happened to be the cook in the school. And so they took pleasure in being able to take the scraps back to my grandmother so she could wash the dishes, because my grandmother cooked for the school, especially the teacher. While my mother is in Canton, she meets her best friend named Brenda. Brenda enrolls in a school called East Texas State University and becomes a teacher. And the only place she could get a job was in Harlingen, Texas. Well, Brenda decides every year at the end of school that she is going to send me all of the leftover worksheets. So I got all the blank worksheets. And one year, she sent me this thing called a grade book. I was so excited. I had the opportunity to teach my imaginary students. And they all had names, and they all received grades. Some passed and some failed, right? But I realized in teaching those imaginary students that I had what they called it. Being an educator was in me, there was no turning back, and as I said earlier, the rest is history. And so that is how I entered into education. So besides superheroes having it, super educators having it, super educators also explore new territories. So fast forward a little bit, I've been selected to be a first-year teacher at a brand new school. Y'all, the school had everything. If you've ever seen those cartoons where you open a door and rays of sunlight shine, that's the way it was at the school. I had everything I could ever want for as a teacher. There was no supply shortage there. But what happened is I was in culture shock. I ended up teaching in an all-Hispanic school as an African-American teacher. In my entire career at that school, I taught less than 10 African-American students and maybe less than 3 Caucasian students. And so I had a really strong mentor teacher there. And one day she was eating some breakfast tacos. And she was like, you should try them. I was like, where'd you get them from? She was like, I bought them from that mom. And I said, does she have a food service license? And she said, no, but you should try them anyway. Well, fast forward. One morning, I I didn't eat breakfast at home. And what was my option? The mama. I bought those tacos from that mom, and I bought them, and I bought them, and I bought them. An interesting thing is that I ended up teaching almost all of that mom's children, while I was at that school. And so super educator heroes have it, but they also have to go to different territories in order to showcase it. The next lesson learned is that super educator heroes experience a life-changing event. Well, I was promoted to an African-American school as an administrator. And I was happy, I was excited. And I remember we went out and we had a superhero theme, we bought the decor. I'm standing behind the counter every morning greeting all of the teachers as they come in. And one morning, in walks the rebel teacher. Sister, you ain't black enough. And I'm like, I'm not black. He goes, I don't think you have what it takes to work over here. Y'all, I was distressed. I went to my office, I shut the door, I called my mom, I said, Mom, they say I'm not black. She said, girl, go find some work to do. And that is exactly what I did. And I started to work and work and work so that we could turn the school around. And so what I realized, leading us to the next event, is that super educators have super powers. So over time, I would work at a series of schools in this large urban district. And one day, after finishing lunch duty, a teacher says to me, I'm dizzy. I was like, you're dizzy? I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna have to get somebody to cover your class. I didn't have any subs in the building. Another teacher comes to me, I can't breathe. You can't breathe. Another kid comes down to the nurse, I'm having an asthma attack. So I called my safety and security team together. We put our minds together. We were like, okay, let's walk the building. We need to see what is going on. We began to smell the smell that was making everyone ill. So I walked back into my office. I pick up the phone. I call my boss. And I said, we're going to evacuate the building. She says, well, you just can't evacuate the building. You gotta have permission to evacuate the building. Who gave you permission? I said, I did. She goes, no, that's not permission from someone else. And I said, okay. And she says, well, keep me posted about what happens. I hung up, the phone went click. I told my safety and security team over our mobile radios, let's evacuate. And that is what we did. We evacuated nearly 700 elementary students. When the parents came to pick them up, they had no clue that we were evacuating because there was a smell. When the safety team came from central staff, they were like, oh my goodness, this is a wonderful job. And then my assistant principal says, you know what? We can count this as a drill. And we counted it as a drill and sent it in and got credit for it. And every time that supervisor, she was actually an assistant, supersedes me, she goes, I remember that time you evacuated. I was like, I bet you do. So the next lesson learned is that superheroes have super help. So one year, another promotion, another school that I know nothing about. It was a high school, and the only thing I knew about high school, I remember telling my mom, well, they got to graduate in 4 years. That was all I knew. take this place anymore. And I remember I called the teachers, many professors. I said, there are many professors. I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it with them. I drove up, parked in my space, and I started crying. I was like, I cannot go into this building. I called one friend and he said, Sharonda, you're with the big dogs now. You gotta get off the porch. And I was like, that is not helping me by. I called someone else. I called someone from my former school. And you would think I would have called the principal or say the area superintendent. I called the school counselor. And she said, Pruitt, because you know in education we call each other by our last names. Pruitt, where are you? I said, I'm in my parking spot. She said, girl, cut the car off and go in the building. And that's what I did. I cut the car off and I went in the building and I worked. And that lady saved my life. She gave me the energy to get up and go when I was about to lose it all. And so superheroes have superhero help over time. But the last and most important lesson that I learned is that super educators battle infernos and are met with challenges, but they win. One day there was a group of siblings. It was dismissal. And if you've ever worked in school, dismissal is tough because you've got to make sure that the students are put in the hands of the people who dropped them off. We had a group of 3 siblings who did not want to go home. So we called the police. They're afraid to go home. The police send their social worker. And I told her, I said, okay, are you taking them to a shelter? And she looks at me and she says, no, I'm taking them home to the very place they didn't want to go. I was shocked. That wasn't a win. I had another student who was afraid her parent was going to beat her. So she slipped out the back window of an apartment, came up to the school. At that point, we're now having to call CPS. It is Friday night in the city. The social worker is coming all the way from another county. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And she took her back home. But there are wins. And the biggest win was that that student was eventually placed in the right placement at school. I had other wins that were kind of funny. Like the time a student took a marble and accidentally hit the sprinkler system. And I said, ooh, I'm on Noah's Ark. I've never seen so much water in my life, and the only thing I could think was, I can't swim. But I made it out of the building. That was a win. And so we have multiple wins on multiple wins. But the biggest win, and the one that sticks with me to this very day, is the time that they wanted me to call the names at graduation. I was like, oh no, that's not going to end well. And we would have our senior committee meetings and we would talk and talk and talk. And they would say, don't forget, Pruitt, you're calling the names, so you need to practice the names. And here I am. Okay, what's the procedure for that? Who types the cards? I finally found out that a teacher that they liked, who had great handwriting, is the person who made the cards out. Well, we're on stage. The graduating class is about 500 students strong. student comes up to the podium and does not have his card. So if you take 500 and multiply it times about 4 desks, that means the audience is about 2,000 people strong. And I'm on the stage at the podium. Where's your card? I don't have a card. Where's your card? I don't have a card. What's your name? I couldn't make out his name. What's your name? Finally, my hand removes itself from the mic. Boy, what is your name? Into the mic. And I looked and all I heard was massive laughter. And so I get back to work the next day, and instead of calling me Pruitt, what's your name? What's your name? That became my new name. But the win in that is that the next year, was I calling the names? No. And so I say all of this so that you understand that in education, sometimes instead of waiting for Superman, we become our own superhero. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Dr. Pruitt?
Hello. We hear so much today about problems in schools and education and whether or not the children are coming out with an education. If you were to do anything, what would you do to improve our public school systems?
Oh, that's a great question. So the first thing I would do was make sure that I had a strong community influence. You cannot do anything without partnering with the community. That makes all the difference. When you look at strong schools, that's what you see. You see a strong community base, a strong PTA, strong industry partnership. Some schools may not have strong parents, but if you can partner them with strong industries and give the students the necessary mentors, then anything is possible. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming out to the exciting return of our Lions Lecture event. And thanks as well to our bartender back there. Thank you. And to our wonderful AV team as well. We appreciate you very much. I want to take the opportunity to invite you all to our next Lions Lecture. It will be here October 27th, again from 5 to 6, and our bartender will be returning, as will our wonderful glasses, so you can collect a collection if you come to all of our Lions Lecture events this semester, which we hope that you will. That event, since it will be October and close to Halloween, it will be in the spirit of the season. And we will welcome to the stage at that time Drs. Carrie Kuchek and Karen Rottenham. So if you are familiar with them, I'm looking forward to their presentations. And then, Dr. VR, did you want to invite them to? Okay. In a second, we'll pull up the screens that were playing earlier so that way you can scan the QR code to check out the graduate school social media as they were providing that for your information. And please don't forget your commemorative glass and take it back.